Jerry Sorbara is one of New York's last furriers. Over the course of his 60-year career, he sold about 40,000 fur garments.
As you see, double fur hood. This is wild mink.
At 82, he's seen it all.
Elizabeth Taylor bought a lot of coats from Neiman's, that I've designed.
But the days when a mink coat was the ultimate status symbol are long gone. Animal rights campaigns and changing trends have pushed the industry into decline.
If you were the animal, would it make any difference to you whether you actually died for fur or died for food? I mean, at the end of the day, you end up dead.
Production of mink pelts in the US declined by about 40% in the past 20 years. Meanwhile, Denmark, the world's largest producer of mink, had to cull its entire mink population out of fear that they would spread COVID. Faux fur companies are competing to fill the void. But are fakes made mostly of plastic really the way to go? Or will this luxurious industry bounce back? Fur was highly prized long before it adorned stars of Hollywood. Native Americans traded pelts for centuries, and then in the 1500s, began exchanging them for weapons and other goods with European settlers. This is John Jacob Astor. In the mid-1800s, he was one of the wealthiest men in the US. Think of him as the Bill Gates of his time. Astor built his fortune on fur. He exported pelts all the way to China. Some of the wealthiest men in America made their fortunes in the fur trade, including those who built Hollywood.
The most notable person perhaps in that story is Adolf Zucker, who went on to found Paramount Pictures in 1912. But previously, he'd made his fortune selling furs.
Many of the icons of the silver screen could be seen draped in fur, which became the ultimate status symbol, especially mink.
A red wool coat with a lining of plain mink, and even the hat is mink trimmed.
The success and the wide-scale promotion of mink farming in the 30s, 40s, and certainly in the 50s in America and Europe really kind of saturated the market.
The first survey of the US mink industry in 1940 recorded almost 3,000 mink farms. A mink coat could be more than $5,000 in the late 40s. That's about $60,000 today.
It was first economics that drove the idea of fake fur, then fashion, and then ultimately ethics.
Imitations had been around for a while, but in the 1950s, synthetic fur became popular. This was the age of plastic and TV dinners, and fake fur fit right in. The sales of synthetic furs reportedly rose quickly from several $1 million in 1954 to around $80 million in 1957, nearly $800 million today. But for a while, demand for the real thing was as strong as ever. The industry in the US hit its peak in the mid-60s, when there were thousands of mink farms producing a record number of pelts. Auction sales reached more than $120 million, about $1 billion today. Sales did suffer a dip in the late 60s, but an iconic ad campaign helped keep the fur industry in the limelight. The American Legion Cooperative's Black Llama campaign featured celebrities draped in black fur. By the mid-1970s, fur was a fixture in the collections of the world's top designers. That's when Jerry decided to open his own salon, and his craftsmanship made him famous.
We were very popular. And Neiman Marcus, of course, they decided to come and buy from us. And Bergdorf Goodman, and many, many more companies throughout the country.
Jerry says even the wife of former Vice President Dan Quayle was a customer, and he still manages to keep his trade alive. To assemble each garment, the pelts are split into sections. A delicate hand is needed to sew the final piece.
I will cut a piece of fabric to give body to the fur. When I give it body, it's because I wanted to have a substance.
It's all done in Jerry's workshop, which is now in his garage. He closed his New York store in 2020, but we'll come back to that later. By 1977, retail sales in the US surpassed $600 million. The first salon at Bergdorf Goodman was reportedly its biggest department, but a storm was brewing in the 80s. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, launched in 1980, and soon its I'd rather go naked than wear fur campaign became a sensation.
It's very cold here today, but this is nothing compared to how the animals suffer.
It goes part and parcel with pacifist movements of the time, the rise of feminism, and another, a whole parcel of reforming ideologies.
Cheaper minks became more popular, leading to a record $1.9 billion in sales in 1989, more than $4 billion today. But with pelts not being worth as much as before, the number of high-end manufacturers in New York's fur district shrunk by more than half. Across the country, production of mink declined by about 40% in the mid-90s. But fur was becoming trendy in another part of the world.
Korea came making furs very cheap, then Hong Kong. And I think everybody got into the fur business.
Including China, where the demand for fur garments was also growing rapidly. But with the expansion of the industry in Asia, also came allegations of animal rights abuse. Animal rights organizations allege animals had been skinned alive, which industry representatives deny. Activists have also accused farmers in the US of mistreating animals.
We have conditions around access to water, to feed, and we have, via the scientists, a number of tests that can show whether the animals are suffering any distress.
Representatives also say the mink are quickly and humanely euthanized with carbon monoxide, while other farmed animals like foxes are electrocuted. Meanwhile, the faux fur industry was growing rapidly. Sales reportedly reached $250 million in 2010. But it's not as if faux furs are the most ethical alternative. Companies like Australian label Unreal Fur know there is no easy answer.
If you want to source top quality recycled fibers, that costs money. If you want it to be certified and legitimate, that costs money. Right now we're using PET, which is a recycled polymeric fiber. Using plastic as a solution, in my opinion, isn't the correct way to go about it.
Faux fur manufacturer EcoPel makes a collection of garments that are made mostly out of recycled materials.
Faux fur can be as soft as rabbit fur, made entirely from recycled plastic bottles.
The company also makes another type of faux fur for designer Stella McCartney that is made from a mix of corn-based ingredients, synthetics, and recycled polyester. Synthetic fibers, like acrylic and polyester, are forms of plastic that are known to contribute to microplastics found in the ocean. If a fake fur coat is thrown away, it can take hundreds of years to break down.
Synthetic fabrics do have an impact on the environment, and we will never deny that. But it is not true to think that a natural material, let's say fur or leather, is free of environmental impact.
The coronavirus pandemic has had devastating effects on the real fur industry. Denmark was the world's largest producer of mink, but all farmed mink were culled in 2020 to limit the spread of COVID after a series of outbreaks. 17 million animals were killed and dumped in mass graves.
Men næsten været en ond drøm jo. Men nu det slut, så det sådan der.
Meanwhile, top fashion houses like Gucci and Versace have stopped using real fur. And almost 24 countries have either banned or pledged to restrict fur farming. In the US, fewer than 300 mink farms remain. But Jerry continues to sew.
I love it. Whether I make this thing, which is nothing that you put around your neck, or I make a pair of earmuffs, or a headband, or a pillow, that makes me happy.
He closed his New York shop just days before the city went into lockdown in 2020.
I had to close my shop. A lot of other furriers closed their shop. The fashion is changing, and the fashion and the elegant people are not around anymore.
His last year in business, he made less than what he once made on a single Saturday back in 1986. He now works out of his home in Connecticut. Here, Jerry receives the fur after it's been sold through an auction house. Times have changed. He's now making a jacket for a debutante, one of more than 24 customers he gets every year. But he still has nothing against fake fur.
I think that the most beautiful thing about this country is the freedom you have, and that you can do anything you like. It's your money. You can buy. No one can tell you what to do or say. And I love that, you know.
And once Jerry stops working, New York will have lost one of its last furriers.
And look at the little pom-pom.